Hi, I'm Melissa Bill, and welcome to the Business Roundup, where we catch up with the movers and shakers in the business world. Today, joining me is Mickey Lebowitz. He's an MD and the author of the EQ Prescription: Put Yourself First to Thrive in Healthcare. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It's very, very appreciative.
So we were talking a little bit about it, but healthcare, the industry. I mean, it was even prior to COVID, a lot of people in the healthcare industry were feeling the pressures and starting to experience some burnout. And you had people who were like looking to get into the profession, maybe starting to kind of say, maybe this isn't where I want to go, and start having a decline in, people that were actually going into the medical field. We're going to talk a little bit about your background first, and then we'll dive into the book. So, before we get started, do you mind discussing a little bit about your background and your own personal experience in burnout and kind of how it led you to write this book?
Sure. Well, again, my story starts back even before I went to medical school, and I had this hope that one day I could make it a positive impact in the world. And I wish it could be the entire world, but I was very content to just do even my small part of the world. And I thought maybe the best way I could make the world a better place to live and is in healthcare. So I went into healthcare with high expectations. It would be kind of a kumbaya where I would get trained and I would help people when they were most vulnerable. And so I went into healthcare with high expectations. I went through all my training, and then I became an endocrinologist and was in private practice for 17 years. At at the end, uh, the system really got to me, and I was kind of given a choice. I was an employed physician at that particular time, and I was given a choice by employers to either see more patients and make the same amount of money or make less money seeing the number of patients. And I said, there's got to be a better way. I was at that particular time, I was kind of beaten down, broken up, and burnt out. And I just wanted to give voice to the people who were doing what I was doing, that was seeing patients all day, every day. And so I was so passionate about what happened with expectations so high and not being met, and knowing from others that they were feeling the same way, that I wrote a book called Losing My Patience: Why I Left My Medical Practice at that particular time. So, with that, the book was I got a lot off my chest at that particular time, but I didn't really have a good solution as to how to help people like me who went in there with high expectations that weren't being met to not only survive but thrive in healthcare. So over the course of years, I was looking for a solution, and that's when I came up with the idea of the EQ prescription.
I like that. Well, I like the first book too, how losing my patience. That's very cool. And then now the book. Now, when was this particular book released?
The Losing My Patience book came out in 2009, and, one of the best things about it, because I was living in my own little, private practice bubble, but when the book came out, a lot of my peers came up to me and said, "I'm glad you wrote the book because now I don't have to," which suggested to me that I really captured what was going on at that particular time. And I'm a sports guy, so I wrote a lot of things in sports metaphors, so I called the other team that was bigger, stronger, faster than our team. And the other team was made up of all the players when they start with the letter P. They were the farmer, the politicians, the payers, the plaintiffs' attorneys. They all started with the letter P. And what I thought we should do at that particular time, which is really kind of naive, was to put all the players in the game, including the patients and the practitioners, in a room, and don't let us out until we come out with best for most, so that we could give the best care that's possible, recognizing that everybody has to give up something. But clearly that wasn't going to happen. So there had to be another way. And that's again when I came up with this idea called the EQ prescription, which really combines emotional intelligence and this other well known concept called the resiliency zone.
And now, why are so many healthcare professionals? I mean, they're dedicating, countless hours and making these sacrifices, but they're feeling, what are some of the primary reasons that they're feeling this dissatisfaction and burnout and they exit early? What, in your opinion, what are some of the main things?
Well, again, I believe it does start at least in part with expectations because I think a lot of people go into healthcare because they really want to make a difference in people's lives and they're willing to spend the time, effort, and energy and money, frankly, and make the sacrifices to do so. But then when they get into the game, and it's not a game at all because we're really taking care of people. People's lives are at stake. But when we get into the practice of medicine, we find that it's not just about us and the patients. It's all these other players, if you will, who are there, and they put additional pressures on you to make it a little less well, to make it less desirable to do what we do. As an example, there are systematic systems in place. So if we wanted to order a particular test, whether it be imaging or lab, we have to get approval from the insurance companies to do so. If we want to order particular medications for patients, sometimes the cost is prohibitive for patients. So we might spend a lot of time doing a history, taking a physical examination, getting all this objective information, coming up with a diagnosis, offering a treatment plan with medications. But then the patients come back and they go, I didn't take the medication because I couldn't afford it. So that's problematic. There are organizational situations where now more practitioners, clinicians, PAs, MPs are employed, and so there are quotas that you had to meet. As an example, I just gave you before, where my employer said that I had to see more patients, and I couldn't physically do it. I was seeing patients all day, every day. I was on the list of best doctors in America. I had a waiting list the size of California, and I couldn't work any harder. But they had their quotas that they wanted us to meet. So there's all this other what I call noise in the system that takes us away from what we really want to do, which is to take care of patients. The electronic medical records could be your best friend. It could be your worst foe. That's come into place. The loss of autonomy, as I just mentioned. So there's many different factors that impact our expectations and put pebbles in our shoes that make us want to say, it's enough. And it's a shame because there's shortages in so many different areas, especially in rural America, with for the and the need for practitioners. So it's not good for anybody.
No, definitely in the long run. And what are some of the common signs of like burnout for people?
Well, Christina Maslach, who I call the godmother of burnout, she described it back in 1981, and she has three different components that would make up the definition of burnout. One is being emotionally exhausted. The second is being depersonalized and treating people as objects, and the third part is that you just don't get that sense of personal accomplishment. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. When I was at my end back in 2007. I would at the end of the week, after seeing patients all day, every day, and then after hours is when the work really started because then you had to make your phone calls back to other clinicians or to the patients, go through all the records, do all your charting, all those types of things. And so the days basically would never end. So by Friday afternoon, I was exhausted. I lived 8 miles from my home, and sometimes I felt so emotionally exhausted that I would say, I would want to call my wife, say, you got to come pick me up. I'm just too exhausted to even drive home, just those 8 miles. So that's what I mean by being emotionally exhausted. You give and you give and you give, and you don't have a chance to really refresh. And then being depersonalized, saying, I've seen so many people, I'm an endocrinologist, and you might get to the point where you say, well, it's just another person with diabetes, another person with high blood pressure or high cholesterol or something like that, as opposed to really being taking care of the person who has the condition. So, and the last is, geez, what am I doing? I don't feel accomplished in what I'm doing. So if you take two of those three or all three of those three, then that would be the definition of burnout.
Now, why like some of the things like, that they tell people, eat healthy, get enough rest, getting exercise and stuff like that. Why are these things not enough? Like for people who are experiencing this type of burnout, why is this just not going to cut it? Like what are some of the things that need to be in place instead, in your opinion?
Well, those things you speak about, Melissa, are right on. I mean, those are fundamental and foundational things to do to remain as healthy as you can. So, getting enough sleep, exercising, eating right, taking breaks, taking vacations, doing things that might bring you joy, listening to music, playing sports, doing all those types of things are all fundamental things. But what do you do when you're actually in the moment? When the proverbial poop is hitting the fan and the heat is on, how do you manage that? It's good to have been well rested and to be well fed and to feel like your body is strong with exercise. But really, then how do you manage yourself in those particular moments when you're having a crucial conversation with a patient, telling them about a significant diagnosis or a mistake that you might have made with omission or commission? How do you manage that? How do you manage having a difference of opinion with one of your colleagues, or having a run-in with a nurse or an administrator? How do you manage all those particular moments? Being well rested and well fed are helpful, but there's got to be additional strategies that help you in those particular moments. And for a long time, for me, I did it with wit and instinct. I was fortunate enough to have a mother who was very knowledgeable about emotions, even before emotional intelligence became a thing. And so she taught me a lot, but I still needed something more than just wit and instinct. And that's when I became familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence and what that whole is. And then along the same at around the same time, I became familiar with this concept called the resiliency zone. And a friend of mine who was a PhD psychologist, we would go around New York State giving seminars and webinars to our peers in healthcare, whether it be clinicians or nurses or MPs or PAs, and using this resiliency zone to help them manage themselves to be able to do what they were trained to do and not burn out and not leave practice prematurely like I did. So I became familiar with that resiliency zone, and then it dawned on me that in order to really be very knowledgeable and use the resiliency zone to the best of your ability, you had to combine it with emotional intelligence. So that's why I came up with those 2, because the only thing really that you can manage is yourself. You can't change the system, so the only thing you really can change and manage is yourself. So that's what this zone is. This concept is to be able to manage yourself without and navigate yourself through the whole healthcare system.
So that's interesting. So it's called emotional intelligence zone. Now, does your book, what are some of the things that your book kind of outlines? Does it talk a little bit about what this is, how people can, like, I guess, navigate like through their emotions? Because I've always heard, basically, like, you're right, you can't change the outside situations. You cannot do anything. All you can do is kind of take care of yourself. Like, you can only, like, tackle that, how you're gonna react to things. So what are some of the things that you found work?
Well, first of all, the emotional intelligence zone is, as I said, are 2 well-known concepts that I combined together. Emotional intelligence was first described back in the early 1990s by John Mayer and Peter Salovey, and then became very popular when Dan Goleman wrote his book Emotional Intelligence and Why It Matters More Than Intellectual Intelligence, or IQ. And so the short story on EQ, because people are always asking, what is this EQ you're talking about? And the answer is that it's just the ability to be smarter with your emotions. Accept it or not, we are emotional beings. We see the world through our 5 senses, or we become emotionally charged when we have an internal thought. And then the question is, how do you be smarter with your emotions? Emotions are just information. They're clues to what's going on. And the question is, are you listening to those cues? Not only your own cues, but the cues of others. So if you're in an interaction with somebody, how do you know what they're thinking and feeling? And one of the best ways to do that is to know how you're thinking and feeling maybe in a similar situation. So EQ is just emotional intelligence, is just the ability to be smarter with your emotions and the emotions of others. It's the ability to be self-aware, know how you think and you feel, what your needs and wants are. It's the ability to and know if you're in your zone or not. It's the ability to know if others are in their zone and how they think and feel. And then once you do that, how do you manage yourself based upon that information that the emotions are giving you? And how do you manage yourself so that you could have the relationships that you want? And then are you making decisions and being intentional with your decisions based upon what you really want and want to avoid in life in general, what you want each day, and what you want with each interaction? So that's what emotional intelligence is. The zone is really just, it's so simple. It's just a visual of two horizontal lines. And if you're between those two horizontal lines, you're your best self, and other people see you as your best self. And then naturally, as life goes on, things will narrow your zone. Like as to your point, you don't get enough sleep, or you didn't have enough food to eat, or you had more things to do than time allowed you to do them, or somebody said something to you or did something to you that made you upset. So that would be things that would narrow your zone, and then things in life will widen your zone. To your point earlier, also, if you get a good night's sleep, or if you're well fed, if you somebody gave you a compliment, if you did something that was that you felt accomplished with, those are all things that will widen your zone. And it's good to know the things that will widen your zone, because if your zone is narrow, you could always fall back to the things that will help you widen your zone. And then naturally, as life goes on, we all get triggered, and we get and we're more apt to get triggered and bumped out of our zones when our zone is narrow. And there are many things in life that will trigger you, and the key is to know what those things are so you can either avoid them or prepare for them. And then when I combine the two together, what I did is say, well, how do I know if I'm in my zone or not? How do I know if it's wide or narrow? How do I know if I'm bumped out or not? And that's where all the emotional intelligence stuff comes into play. How do that self-awareness? Oh, yes, I recognize that I'm in my zone, or it's not, or narrow or wide, or I'm bumped out. How do I know if the other person's in their zone or not? That's also emotional intelligence and social awareness, and on and on. How do I manage myself to stay in the zone, to get back in the zone if I'm bumped out, and then to make decisions with what I really want and want to avoid? So that's why I combine the 2, which I think is kinda novel.
No, that is very cool. And that now this is something that's in the book. Like when people are reading, do they get a better idea so that they can kind of try to discover more about themselves as far as because I know and I think as you age too, like I think when you're younger, you have like more like less tolerance, I think. I don't know. It depends. But I feel like I let less things like irritate me or really push me. I try to, not allow it to bother me like as much as when you're younger. Like every single thing that someone says to you makes you like, when you're a teenager, you take it to heart, you feel bad about yourself, or whatever. But when you get older, you kind of know yourself, you're more in tune with yourself and you're not as prone to like be, I guess, like swayed as much, that type of thing. Do you find that with people that they grow and they're like with their maturity and their
Well,
emotion?
there's an old story that, when you're young, you care about what people are thinking about you. When you get a little bit older, you find out, that they weren't thinking about you at all. So, um, but that's the way the book is organized is, I describe in some detail what the zone is. I describe in some detail what emotional intelligence is. I give examples of what emotional intelligence looks like. And for so and you I bet you and your viewers would know, because the people who have EQ kinda get it. They're just people who you go, "That person really gets it." So I give examples of what it looks like, what emotional intelligence looks like. Emotional intelligence could be measured, so I give examples of, using emotional intelligence survey and how I use it. I'm a certified coach, with emotional intelligence, and how I use the surveys, to help me better manage people and coach them. And then I also describe in the book why emotional intelligence could be valuable. So for clinicians, I for clinicians really value three different things. They value, the credibility of the person giving you the information. They value the data, and they value what's in it for me. So I spent
Hello.
a good amount of time in the book describing why emotional intelligence is valuable to them, and then I give a variety of, strategies on how to get better at emotional intelligence. One of the most beautiful things about emotional intelligence is that it's a competency. It's something that you can get
So I just wanted to be clear. So in the book, you talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, and kind of how people can determine how much, how little, like how much they might have, or where are some ways that they might be able to grow.
Right. So one of the beautiful things about emotional intelligence amongst many is that it's measurable. And as opposed to IQ tends to be fixed. So you reach your maximum IQ at like your teenage years. That's what the theory is. And you can't learn more facts to increase your IQ. However, for emotional intelligence, it's measurable through a variety of different surveys. And so in the book, I describe one of the surveys that I was trained on. And then when I coach my students or I've coached many clinicians and nurses and nurse practitioners, PAs. I use these emotional intelligence assessments to show them to quantify where their emotional intelligence is, and you'd be shocked to see how number one they all agree with the results of the survey, and then they're all able to self adjust, and that because they tend to be pretty competitive people, and when they see that there's opportunities for them, and that's the word I like to use is opportunities to get better, they really do so. There's an old riddle, and that is how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is one, but the light bulb has to want to change. And when these high pressure or highly motivated people see their emotional intelligence results, and if they're not as high as they would, or they don't score as high as they would like to be, they really are very interested in learning ways that they can get better. And that's one of the gists of the book is not only in addition to telling people or showing people, telling people what emotional intelligence is, what the zone is. I tell them why it's important to them and what's in it for them to be more emotionally intelligent, not only in their professional lives, but even in their personal lives. But I also give them a lot of strategies on how to do so. And that's the beautiful thing about EQ is that you can get better at it. I'll give you an example. You know, how do you know if you're in your zone or not? It does take self-awareness, but if you don't do something very simple, which is something like what I call do the check-in. Check in with yourself during the course of the day. Many people's days are a roller coaster. It's not a straight line up or down. It's some good moments, less good moments. But how do you know if you're in a good moment or not? Do the check-in. It only takes a moment to do so. You don't have to sit by a river and chant a mantra, although you could if you'd like to. And for many people, that's very helpful, and they meditate. But during the course of our days, we don't really have that opportunity to steal away time. We have to, in that particular moment, know, am I best self right now? And if I'm not my best self, what do I have to do to get to be my best self? Because it's really hard to give your best care unless you are your best self at that particular moment. And the way to do that is to check in. Am I in my best spot or not? How do I manage myself to stay in that spot or to get back in my spot? Because if you go into a crucial conversation or any conversation when you're not your best, sometimes those conversations, those interactions spiral down and they go in a direction that you don't want it to go. And I give you many examples of that. And I write a lot about it in the book. Another thing to do is when your buttons are pushed and you're triggered, do you react or do you hit the pause button and respond? Because when you react, and you're in fight or flight, that blood flow that naturally goes to the part of your brain that allows you to do your best thinking goes to the parts of your body, the muscles, to allow you to fight or flight. So many people, if not most people, can't do their best thinking when they're agitated or upset or depressed or withdrawn because they tend to be in fight or flight, and you can't do your best thinking. Thinking about driving down a highway, a busy highway, and somebody's asking you to solve some very complicated problem. You can't do that when you're white knuckling it, right? So you have to be able to be your best self. So your mind is your best and you can give your best.
That makes sense too. So just kind of realizing where you are at that moment and taking that time instead of just reacting.
Absolutely. Yeah. The responding is, one of the great legacy stories of time is Abraham Lincoln. And he was upset by one of the things that his generals did. And so he wrote a nasty letter back to the general. But he said, geez, before I send this, let me put this in my drawer. And if I still feel the same way tomorrow, I'll send the letter. Recognizing that if he sent the letter when he was really upset, it would just make the whole situation worse. He put the letter in his drawer. He read the letter the next day and he never sent it. And I think that's a great example of hitting the pause button and responding as opposed to reacting. Because if you react, you might not get what you want, and you might get what you want to avoid, as opposed to responding, which allows you to really get what you want
Yeah, very true.
and be intentional with your decisions and your thoughts.
No, definitely. And now if people wanted, to find the book, would it be on Amazon, Barnes& and Nobles? Where are some of the places they can find the book?
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Allow me to give a little bit of a plug. The book is available in all places where books are sold, so certainly on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and it's available in paperback. It's available in electronic book and an ebook, and through the miracle of AI, the book is also available in audiobook. So my daughter, who's really smart about these types of things, found some software where I talked into the software using obviously my voice and for about 30 minutes. And then we submitted or put inputted my a PDF of my book into the software, and it read the entire book using my voice. So if you don't mind hearing my voice on your podcast, you could hear my voice for 6 hours and 55 minutes listening to the book. And my daughter, who is a broadcast journalism major from Northwestern, she read the forward to the book, and she actually has a beautiful voice to listen to.
Oh, that is very cool. I know, look at the things that AI, like, I still remember, because my degree's in broadcast journalism too, mass communications, and back then there was these huge beta tapes. You had to go out into the field, record your stuff, go back to a huge machine, cut everything up and edit it. Now it's just like, you just can do everything from your desktop. It's amazing.
It is amazing. So one of the great things about AI, amongst many.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us today, and I'm definitely going to do more reading. I started to look into the book, and I plan on ordering a copy myself. So I appreciate so much you joining because I think it's for good for anybody, not just in the medical field, but just in your life in general.
Oh, that I am so glad you said that because I mentioned some of the great things about emotional intelligence, that it's measurable. One of the other great things about it is that it's transferable. So the book is written specifically for people in healthcare because that's my niche. Although I've had many people who are not in healthcare read it because you could use all the same strategies that you use professionally in your personal life also. So one of my friends said, "Oh, I use," and she's a physician. She said, "I use your strategies in the exam room in the clinic. However, when I get home, I need to do it this I need to do it the same when I'm with my kids and when the kids push their buttons or whatnot. Can I pause? Can I check in with myself? Do I know how I think and I feel? Do I know how my kids think and feel? How do I show empathy, which is another huge part of the book. And so it's all transferable into your personal life as in addition to your professional life. Everybody wins.
Yep. Oh, but wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Listen, thank you so much for having me. It was really nice you invite me. Appreciate it.
And now, also, really quick, then, do you have a website as well where people could find out more about you?
I do. Thank you for asking that. It's called EQ4, the number 4 healthcare.com. So
Yep.
EQ4healthcare.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I welcome people connecting with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, those types of things. So I wasn't really a big social media person before all this, but I've come to learn that social media is very, very helpful. And I've connected with so many wonderful people who have similar types of interests to basically make the world a better place. You know, one of the things about emotional intelligence is really is really having self-direction to know what you really want. And what I really want is there's a Hebrew saying called tikkun olam, which is to repair the world, make it better. And there are many people who have contacted me through LinkedIn who have the same type of mission in their life. They just want to make the world a better. So the question is, how could we could connect each other, join forces to make the world better in healthcare and beyond.
Yeah, so true. Well, again, thank you so much,
Yeah.
and I hope to have you back on again down the road.
It'd be my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining the Business Roundup, where we always try to bring you interviews with some of the leading people in business, whether it be technology, finance, or energy. I hope you tune in. I hope you subscribe and listen, and we'll give you updates for new interviews that are coming up. Until next time, I'm Melissa Bell.